Hello, my name is Darcy Gilbert, and welcome to my COM 105 video on nonverbal communication between cultures, the importance of our expressions and gestures. What would the world be like if God created us all identical? What if we had the same skin, hair, and eye color? What if we had the same values, morals, and beliefs? Honestly, it sounds like a peaceful world to me, one with no war or violence because differences do not exist. It could be perceived as God creating a world for himself, giving life to humans only to help him maintain that world. But fortunately for us, God is gracious, and he created a world in which we could all enjoy together. The world may be full of negativity, but we are unique. We have the potential to grow, discover, and enrich ourselves through the culture around us. However, the uniqueness God has given us and the diversity he has spread throughout the world brings barriers. Imagine the misunderstandings between cultures that occur because of communication barriers. When we travel to a different country, if we're not educated in their language, we may have to depend on a facial expression or a gesture to help us determine if a police officer is welcoming us to his country or reprimanding us for doing something wrong. In the world, there are 6,909 distinct living languages. 350 of those languages are spoken in the United States. Surprisingly, since the United States is known as the melting pot, one would think that we would be in the top rankings for the most diverse country. We're not even close. We're somewhere in the middle, if not lower, with Canada actually being ranked in the top 20. But whether we're ranked 10th or 100th, unless you're living under a rock or in a cave, anyone living in the US can see just how diverse we are. What exactly does this mean? Well, it means we're a culturally enriched country. It means that we will have language barriers and differences in how we convey words and expressions. More than likely, if you find yourself giving a speech to a large audience, more than one of your listeners will have learned English as their second language. It is important to be mindful of the audience and to remember that language barriers are more than not speaking one another's language. It is also about how different cultures respond to words, making our expressions and our gestures that much more important. Sometimes facial expressions speak louder than words. A facial expression in one culture may have a completely different meaning in another. Let's take the smile, for example. You are listening to a speech by a Japanese woman. She starts to discuss her father, and with a smile, she tells you he passed away last week. You gasp. How can she discuss her father's death with a smile on her face? Well, in the Japanese culture, women are taught not to show pain. We may think that she's cold-hearted, but in her culture, it's appropriate. Now, not knowing this, you may stop listening to her speech or you may lose complete respect for her. Now, in her defense, it was culturally appropriate. However, she did not take into consideration that a majority of her audience would not be from the same culture. Now let's turn the tables. If I was giving this speech in Japan, more than likely I would lose the respect of my audience by showing my emotions over the death of a loved one. My face has the ability to make numerous expressions and to really give the audience a sense of how I feel on the topic. If I'm discussing Disneyland with an audience and I'm trying to convince them that it's the happiest place on earth, doing so with an angry and concerned look on my face would not convey the words that I'm speaking. It's hard to be mindful of facial expressions. I know I'm making a ton of them now, but they can really make or break a speaker's connection with their audience. While I'm focusing on not making too many facial expressions, I've also been trying to figure out what to do with my hands. I enjoy moving them around and gesturing them as I speak. A speaker wants their audience to focus on their speech and not the next movement their hand is going to make. Gestures can be very distracting. In addition to hand gestures, there's also eye contact, greetings, and additional hand signs that can be misunderstanding in many cultures. Europeans use cheek kissing as a way to say hello and goodbye. If presenting a speech in Europe, it would be appropriate to greet someone with a cheek kiss. It may actually be offensive if you don't. However, if you tried something like that in the United States, you'd probably get slapped upside the head. As we have learned in this class, eye contact is extremely important, helps the speaker engage with their audience. It also helps the speaker gauge the audience and their interest and response to the speech. However, in Asian and Middle Eastern cultures, they find it rude and offensive. Most of the speeches I present are in front of a diverse audience of parents. While I can only assume that most of them are accustomed to American traditions, I wouldn't want to offend anyone. Since I enjoy using my hands to talk, I have to be very cautious of how I use them. And what I mean by this is if I say to the audience, okay, I may want to use a hand gesture to do so, but I could potentially offend my Brazilian audience by doing an okay hand gesture, or I can make my Japanese audience thinking I'm switching the subject to money by giving them a thumbs up gesture. As if writing a speech isn't hard enough, presenting it in front of dozens of people and trying to be mindful of your nonverbal communication. When preparing a speech, knowing the audience is crucial, because the speech may not be appropriate for one group the same way it's appropriate for another. While preparing this speech, I realized that it was going to be hard for me because I've never seen my audience physically. I can gauge from pictures and posts and speeches I have watched, but in a way I walked in blind. I tried to be mindful of my facial expressions and gestures. I chose to leave out examples of the hand gestures in fear that I may actually offend someone in this class. As I said at the beginning, we are fortunate that God gave us a culturally enriched world. And with the amount of verbal language barriers that exist, using appropriate nonverbal communication can be the difference between making a new friend or an enemy. Thank you for your time.